Welcome back to the program. We got on the telephone line this morning. Congressman French Hill joins us again. French, welcome back, sir.
Paul, it's great to be with you. Thanks for the invite.
Yes, sir. Hey, I want to start with the fact that this is the 17-year anniversary of the September 11, 2001 terror attacks on New York and the Pentagon. And I just, where were you? I mean, a lot of people ask that. Where were you on September 11, 2001?
At 7:46, I was driving between Bentonville, Arkansas, and Bella Vista, Arkansas, to go to my first meeting with the FDIC on a bank acquisition up at Bella Vista of a failed bank there. And I remember vividly hearing the news story that a small plane had clipped the antenna on Tower 1. And, of course, that's not what happened, but that's, as I was driving along, that's what the news report was.
Wow. And I was just saying last hour how much this event 17 years ago changed the country, the mentality of the country. Seems like, forever. Lots happened in 17 years.
Well, it's amazing. First, I want to say my salute to the families who lost somebody on 9/11, a first responder or somebody in one of the attacks. I lost a very good friend of mine I worked with at the Senate Banking Committee. Neil Levin was our counsel on the Banking Committee, and he had been named the head CEO of the Port Authority, and he was up in the windows on the world that day. And I think about him every year. He left his family behind. Yeah, it's changed our whole focus, and it's been devastating to see Islamic terrorism brought to the shores of America and brought to the shores of Europe, and it's changed our whole defense posture since that fateful day.
Yeah, it certainly has. I want to talk just a little bit about what you've been doing in Washington, D.C., and one of the things, that really stuck out to me, there's this program called the Congressional App Challenge. And first of all, tell us a little bit about that. What's the Congressional App Challenge?
Well, it follows on about 30 years ago. Congress wanted to encourage arts, and they had an art contest for all 435 congressional districts from high school students, and the winners from each district hung their art in the Capitol. And it's beautiful. You see it as you walk through the tunnel of the Capitol. So to flash forward to about 3 years ago, they wanted to encourage coding for high school students and encourage STEM activities, so they created the Congressional App Challenge. And last year, it's really grown. We had 75 applications submitted over the last couple of years, so it's really grown in our high schools, and we're encouraging our high schools to submit apps. And one of our winner last year, Ann Lee at Central High, went on to compete in the Nationals and was recognized in Washington.
And that's what I thought was interesting. This, Arkansan Ann Lee, her app specifically was a car check app to help parents not forget to take their children out of the car. And this is a tragedy, a potential tragedy that has actually happened and hit home right here in Arkansas. And I thought, wow, what a great idea to have an app to say, to remind parents to not leave their kids in the car,
Well, this is what I love about kids, because they're unfiltered when they're thinking about art or thinking about coding for an app. They don't have all the clutter a lot of us older folks have when we're thinking about thinking creatively about solving a problem, finding a solution. And so these kids are looking at everyday issues and looking at their affection, having grown up with a digital world, and looking for an easier way to accomplish a task. And in this instance, think about the kids that might be saved because of it. She's had a lot of interest in her app. She's a remarkable young woman.
We're talking with Congressman French Hill. Let's talk about the economy. What are your thoughts on? You got the unemployment rate of young Americans is doing good. You've got excellent GDP growth, looking like, according to some, predictions, it's going to get even better. What are your thoughts?
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, folks, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us today. Congratulations, you found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine here. And I want you to be a part of that. Excuse me. Phone number 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Men, I had a great time last night. Conduit for Action was at the Northeast Arkansas Tea Party. So I swung by there, got to talk to some great folks, some very educated folks. Mr. Josh Waters then went over the different ballot issues, and really it's an educational effort trying to get people to understand these different issues. You know, you've got issue one, which is the bad tort reform. Matter of fact, we're going to have Mr. Joey McCutcheon on the program, Fort Smith attorney, coming up at 7:33 to talk more about that. Then, of course, you got voter ID, which is issue two. Issue three would be the term limits, and of course, a lot of these are tied up in court. Issue four, casinos, and issue five is the minimum wage. Now, we've been talking a lot recently about the minimum wage issue just because it's going to be terrible for business owners. I saw where Congressman Bruce Westerman, French Hill, and Congressman Rick Crawford came out against issue five, the minimum wage increase, and I think that's because they know they represent small businesses and they want a healthy economy, and they don't want the government to come in and basically torpedo it. Speaking of French Hill, he'll be on the program tomorrow. So you don't want to miss Conduit News Radio tomorrow morning at 7:33. Coming up at 7, we'll be talking with Democrat candidate for Senate here in Arkansas from District 19, Susie Epperson will be on the program. She's running against James Sturch. Now, James Sturch is the candidate that Republican that beat Linda Collins Smith in that Republican primary. And yesterday, and I've had a lot of people saying, "Hey, Paul, why don't you have Susie Epperson on? She's running as a Democrat, and you need to ask her some questions." And I said, "Okay, all right, why?" Plus, it'll drive the establishment, Marble Palace establishment, crazy because they're just convinced that it's all about whatever T-shirt you're wearing, and it seems like they're afraid of ideas and honest debate and honest discussion. So, I'll be talking with Susie Epperson coming up at 7:05 today. Let's start with the news, and I know you heard some of it yesterday, but let's go ahead and get into it. You have this sex crimes investigator. Her name is Rachel Mitchell. She is she's the woman that Senate Republicans hired up over in D.C. To basically analyze and question Christine Blasey Ford's testimony and her sworn testimony, and then what she said and before the committee. And of course the Democrats routinely criticize the Republicans. You're just hiring a woman. You're just hiring a woman because you're all white men, and you have to hire a woman. You don't want the optics of questioning Christine Blasey Ford and being a white male. Basically what you need to take away from that is if they hadn't have hired the sex crimes investigator, Rachel Mitchell, they would have said, you're just a bunch of white men questioning whether or not this really happened or not. That's what they would have said had they not hired. It's catch-22. These people, you can't win. There's now, I saw Kamala Harris now has this other anonymous allegation of Brett Kavanaugh and somebody, committing sexual assault in a car a long time ago. I mean, it's never going to end. Again, I hope this FBI investigation, I know they, quote, expanded it yesterday. But I hope it's over this morning. I hope they come out and said, well, we did our due diligence, it's over. And I just want to watch the Democrats melt down over that. I really do. Mitch McConnell, say what you want to about him. I don't have a lot of nice things to say, but he does say there's going to be a vote this week. The whiteboard behind me reads, confirm Cav, as in confirm Brett Kavanaugh. This is ridiculous. You don't, often agree with Lindsey Graham, but he's exactly right. If you don't vote for him and you're a Republican, you're just legitimizing all of this nonsense. President Trump won't be able to get any Supreme. This is the truth. If you don't confirm Kavanaugh, there will be no other Supreme Court justice that will get confirmed. I'm convinced of that now more than ever because this party, this movement, they know they will constantly move the goalposts. I promise you, if you don't confirm Brett Kavanaugh, you won't confirm Amy Barrett Cohen. You won't confirm her. They will find some other reason. Matter of fact, there is already a website. There's already a website domain name bought called Stop Amy Barrett Cohen. And so presumably she's going to be the next nominee for the Supreme Court. If you don't confirm Kavanaugh, you will not confirm Amy Barrett Cohen. I promise you. When you say, well, no, it would be different. No. You people continue to play to the media's tune. And the one reason President Trump has been so successful is because it's Donald Trump that sets the narrative. And he refuses to dance to the beat that the media sets. Instead, he dances to his own beat, and it drives them nuts. It's like a virus that's been inserted into the code. Everything was working perfectly. Their control over our minds was working perfectly in terms of how they present information, and now all of a sudden it's not working the way. And what Jeff Flake did and what some of these other wishy-washy Republicans are doing is they're trying to dance to the media. They think that they will appease the media. You're never going to satisfy them. You're never going to satisfy the media. It doesn't matter if you say, well, every woman should be believed. That doesn't matter. You can say that all you want. But you're never going to appease them. Anyway. Right now, by the way, the mainstream media can't say enough nice things about Jeff Flake. Have you noticed that? Jeff Flake is amazing, right? I wonder if they'll say the same thing about Joe Manchin if he votes with the Republicans. Because Jeff Flake essentially shows that, he's sympathetic to the Democratic argument about an FBI investigation. Do you think the mainstream media will celebrate Joe Manchin if he crosses, West Virginia Democrat, if he crosses over and votes for Kavanaugh? Do you think they'll say, oh, wow, what a display of bipartisanship? No, they'll say, he's just a white man. Democrats, they still have a lot of white men in their parties. That, the white men who are just, it used to be, I remember back, you remember the good old days back in the Obama administration when white men were just, suspected terrorists, domestic terrorists? Well, now, we're also sexual predators. But you just don't think it could get any worse, but it just continues to, it's just broaden the brush, get a very wide brush. Anyway, so this woman, Rachel Mitchell, the sex crimes investigator, she released a 5-page memo yesterday. I'm sure you heard about it, but in it essentially rips Christine Blasey Ford's. I say Blasey because I'm trying to outdo the media here. First it was Christine Blasey Ford, and then it was Christine Blasey Ford. You got to make sure you pronounce the A correctly in that name, and so Blasey sounds a little bit more sophisticated than Blasey. So why not just go with blasé, Maybe there's, I don't know. It just sounds even more sophisticated, right? You want to make sure you frame things right for the folks because, their brains are like little moldable mush, and you can get your message across to them. So she detailed at length how Ford's case is crippled by a changing and inconsistent story, according to the Daily Caller News Foundation. Habitual inability to identify Kavanaugh in the retelling of the account, inability to have corroborating witnesses or evidence of the event, increasingly vague memories of the event, and inability to remember major details of even recent events involving the allegations. Rachel Mitchell, the sex crimes investigator, ultimately ruled, and by the way, you would think, wow, that's really smart. We have a serious allegation, or, we're supposed to take it serious, right? So let's get a serious sex crimes investigator, and let's actually figure out if there's a case here. No. Republicans are just a bunch of white men. Mitchell ultimately ruled that there wasn't enough evidence to bring criminal charges against U.S. Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, calling it a he said, she said case that is incredibly difficult to prove. She continues, but this case is even weaker than that. I do not think a reasonable prosecutor would bring the case based on the evidence before the committee. By the way, the phrase reasonable prosecutor, where have we heard that before? Oh, yeah, right, James Comey. I don't think any reasonable prosecutor would bring charges against Hillary Clinton. Boy, the left certainly loved that statement back in the day. Not anymore. Mitchell concluded that no reasonable prosecutor would bring charges, but here is the kicker, scrolling down here. The timeline. This is the most damning part of the memo in terms of people who are in the Christine Blasey Ford camp. Let me go down here. Hang on a second. Oh, yeah, here it is. So, Dr. Ford has not offered a consistent account of when the alleged assault happened. This is from the memo. In a July 6th text to the Washington Post, she said it happened, meaning the event, the alleged sexual assault or sexual misconduct, happened in the, quote, mid-1980s. The mid-1980s. Okay. In her July 30th letter to Senator Feinstein, she said it happened in the early 80s. Okay. Her August 7th statement to the Polygrapher said it happened one high school summer in the early 80s. But she crossed out the word early for reasons she did not explain. Okay. A September 16th Washington Post article reported that Dr. Ford said it happened in the summer of 1982. Similarly, the September 16th article reported that notes from an individual therapy session in 2013 show her describing the assault as occurring in her late teens. But she told the Post and the committee that she was 15 when the assault allegedly occurred. She has not turned over her therapy records for the committee to review. Now, stop. My question is this. Is she turning her therapy records over to the FBI? That's a good question. Is she going to turn her therapy records over to the FBI? You would think, right? You would think that the FBI would already have them. Of course, the FBI can just ask questions in this investigation. I don't believe they can compel you to produce or talk you. At this investigation, no witnesses have to talk to the FBI. You don't have to give the FBI anything. While it is common for victims to be uncertain about dates, Dr. Ford failed to explain how she was suddenly able to narrow the time frame to a particular season and a particular year. So you go from the mid-'80s, then you go to the early 80s, then you go to the summer of 1982. You go from it happened in my late teens to it happening when I was 15. Now, why is that significant? Why is that relevant? Well, it's very simple. If this assault happened in the late 1980s, then Brett Kavanaugh was already in college at Yale and was, not anywhere around where this alleged event took place. But if you make it in the summer of 1982, and thank goodness Brett Kavanaugh has that calendar, but if you make it in the summer of 1982, all of a sudden now the two are at least in the same geographical areas where it's conceivable that they could, that this event could have happened and implicate Brett Kavanaugh. But see, all of this is important because Brett Kavanaugh is presumed innocent. And her story doesn't make any sense. The memo goes on. Dr. Ford has struggled to identify Judge Kavanaugh as the assailant by name. No name was given in her 2012 marriage therapy notes. No name was given in her 2013 individual therapy notes. Dr. Ford's husband claims to recall that she identified Judge Kavanaugh by name in 2012. At that point, Judge Kavanaugh's name was widely reported in the press as a potential Supreme Court nominee if Governor Romney won the presidential election. In any event, it took Dr. Ford over 30 years to name her assailant. Delayed disclosure of abuse is common, so this is not positive. When speaking with her husband, Dr. Ford changed her description of the incident to become less specific. Dr. Ford testified that she told her husband about a sexual assault before they were married, but she told the Washington Post that she informed her husband that she was the victim of physical abuse at the beginning of their marriage. She testified that both times she was referring to the same incident. Dr. Ford has no memory of key details of the night in question, details that could help corroborate her account. She does not remember who invited her to the party or how she heard about it. She does not remember how she got to the party. Stop. And also, the people she claims were there dispute ever being there. They don't corroborate her story at all. She does not remember in what house the assault allegedly took place or where the house was located with any specificity. Perhaps most importantly, she does not remember how she got from the party back to her house. Her inability to remember this detail raises significant questions because there was alcohol involved. Again, it's pretty hard to prove anything if we're talking about something that maybe happened 35 years ago. Now, what did Brett Kavanaugh say about this? He doesn't deny that something happened to her sometime, somewhen, someplace, but it wasn't him. And there's enough holes in this story. And by the way, the sex crimes investigator says you wouldn't bring charges based on this. Anyway, we're going to take a break here. Let me know what you think. You can sound off over on our Facebook page where our live stream video is going, facebook.com/Conduit News. And we'll be back here in just a moment. Thoughts on this, Congressman French Hill?
Well, Paul, look, just in the last few hours, we've had President Obama trying to take credit for the faster economic growth. And I just find that really preposterous. During the last couple of years of President Bush, when we slumped into recession and then had the crash, and then all 8 years of President Obama, you had economic growth at 1.8% average for that period. That's the lowest since World War II. It was a very bad, anemic recovery. And part of that was the $1 trillion cost and complexity of the Affordable Care Act, cutting people's work hours back in the Affordable Care Act, putting on new regulations across all sizes of business, condemning business, passing the Dodd-Frank Act, which hurt loans for families and businesses and for individuals. So I think President Trump does deserve credit for the faster economic.
Money, power, prestige, essence, available now from aristocrats serving Arkansas. From Zenata Rhino Collection, the fragrance of backroom deals, nepotism, the aroma of higher taxes, subliminal deception, deep state, ace. Made right here in Arkansas by a taxpayer-funded Chinese factory. Every bottle carefully crafted for you. Gender neutral. Nothing says aristocrat like Essence of Bureaucrat. Essence of Bureaucrat by Asa.
Available now in the Marble Palace gift shop.
Paul Harrell parody. News Fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
At this point, if you're on this this bandwagon of doubting Judge Kavanaugh, and you're somebody who watched both of the testimonies, you watched Christine Blasey Ford's testimony, and then you watched Judge Kavanaugh's testimony. And you're still on this, bandwagon. It's like, well, can you believe how emotional Kavanaugh was? How can he possibly be an impartial justice? Well, judges are human beings, and when you say something about them personally, I think they are perfectly within their rights to get personal back, right? And people are claiming that Judge Brett Kavanaugh is now a conspiracy theorist, some of the Democrats, because he threw down on the Clintons in his testimony because, the Clintons never, try to play political chess, and they never try to get revenge against political opponents or anything like that. Yeah, that's a conspiracy. Yeah, give me a break. I'm so glad he dropped that truth bomb in the committee last week. This is about them losing 2016 and revenge of the Clintons. And no, it's not a conspiracy theorist. That's exactly what it is. And at this point, if you don't think Christine Blasey Ford, whether something happened to her or not, if you don't think she is being used in all of this, we're all supposed to pretend that this is not political. The fact that Dianne Feinstein sat on this makes it political. We're all supposed, and some of these Republicans who are on the fence and they're walking on these eggshells and they're like, well, I don't know, I don't want to offend anybody. Listen. In order to continue with what the mainstream media tells you should think, the mainstream media is telling you what your reaction should be to all this. You have to play. You have to play like you're a moron. You have to play like you are a complete idiot. If you think this is not about one thing and one thing only, it's about stopping President Trump from getting to put somebody on the court that he nominates who's conservative and who will reverse Roe versus Wade. You are. I mean, if you are swallowing this narrative, if you are swallowing this, I have to say this, and I also have to, I'm probably going to vote for him. I'm a Republican, but I've got to play ball in this way so I can, feel good, and I can, I'm one of the reasonable Republicans. I'm reasonable. I'm not like them over there. I'm one of the reasonable ones. If you're playing that game at this point, then. Do you not see how close we are to the goal of having a solid 5-4 majority, if not greater on other issues, but a solid 5-4 when it comes to whether or not somebody has the constitutional right to deny a baby life and therefore liberty and the pursuit of happiness? Do you not see how close we are to something like that? Do you not see how close we are to ending the genocide that's been going on in this country since 1974? Do you really care about it? I mean, I'm sorry. Wake up. See through the tactics. It's obvious what's going on. To think that, maybe there's something. No. We're not stupid, okay? We're not morons. We know what this is. Right? I mean, just look at what they did. Look at what Dianne Feinstein did. She sat on the memo, right? She met with Kavanaugh on the 20th, and she had already recommended attorneys to Christine Blasey Ford. This was calculated. And guess what? Then her attorneys kept from her that the staffers of the Judiciary Committee were willing to fly to California to take her testimony there, which would have what? Protected her anonymity, which supposedly is what she wanted. This all would have been handled. Her anonymity would have been protected. They would have, brought in the sex crime investigator, but guess what? It wouldn't have been done before the press. It wouldn't have been done to delay. There wouldn't be an expanded FBI investigation. Wake up, Republicans. Confirm Kavanaugh.
When you see the removal of regulations billions of dollars of costs removed and regulatory burden at the federal level by this president and by congressional action, as well as the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. These have spurred economic growth and brought jobs back to the U.S. and created new opportunities. Plus, people are not talking down business. Trump, as a business guy, is out talking up business. So I really think it's impressive to see that we've now averaged 3.1% in the last 18 months, had this recent quarter just over 4%. The Atlanta Fed thinks we may get another quarter over 4%. And I just would say to listeners, those are not trends, but if we have a trend that has economic growth over 3%, that's excellent, really good. And it allows us to have the resources we need in our federal government, and that means that people are going to see higher wages and more job opportunities.
You are exactly right. And then, then you have small business optimism. As it's at a record high. I mean, people just feel good about going to work. And so it's just, really, really exciting times. And, we need to continue this. Don't need to go back to the old policies. We need to continue with these policies and, even better policies in the future.
Right. I mean, the Fed has been slowly raising interest rates. They've got a plan to slowly normalize rates from the absolute ridiculous levels that they stayed too low, in my view, too long after the crash based on the Fed's easing policy. I think they should have begun a slight increase earlier, but nonetheless, they're doing it. And we're seeing their timing on that's important because we're now seeing robust wage growth. We've seen the fastest wage growth for Americans in this last reporting period that we haven't seen in a decade. Mm-hmm. So people's wages are going up. I know the opposition political party claims they're not, but they are. And so I think, again, that's because productivity is gaining.
I heard somebody say, well, first of all, the Democrats want to undo the tax cut, the tax legislation from last year. But it's I heard, I can't remember who it was. It might have been a fellow talk radio host, but they were saying, the Democrats called the tax cut crumbs, but now they want their crumbs back. They want to undo what has been done here.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. They have they have nothing to run on this fall, and all they're talking about doing is shutting down law enforcement on the border, having a $32 trillion Medicare for all program, raising.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate everybody out there listening. Boy, I've got a great carefully crafted language segment for you guys coming up in the next segment. I was originally going to look for some carefully crafted language in the Kavanaugh hearings. I mean, everybody's concerned about this, right? It's a huge issue, obviously, but there was actually an Arkansas issue that came up yesterday. A picture on Facebook that I saw, and I'll tell you about carefully crafted language in the next hour. So you certainly want to stay tuned for that. Hang on one second. Let me take a look at something. Okay, so coming up at the top of the hour, we're going to be talking with Susie Epperson. Excited about that. And then let's see here. We got Joey McCutcheon going to talk some issue 1 coming up at 7:33. So real quick, though, before we get to what I want to call the shakedown of the shakedown, the shakedown of the shakedown. I'll tell you what that means here in just a minute. But did anybody see what Kanye West? Now, Kanye West is a rapper. Kanye West is a guy that has been in pop culture for a pretty good time, pretty long while now. He has come out as basically a supporter for Trump. The first time he came out as a supporter for Trump, he was hospitalized. Now, I want to know how that even happens. How does it happen that you're Kanye West, you come out, you're supposed to be, some sort of, basically a propagandist for the left and the Hollywood types and everything else, and all of a sudden he comes out for Trump and then he goes in the hospital for a while. What's going on there? What's going on there? But then he meets with Trump. He wears this Make America Great Again hat, and he goes on Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live has become a place where comedy goes to die. And I say that as somebody who grew up watching Saturday Night Live, who grew up appreciating Saturday Night Live, especially when it wasn't so political. I mean, there were times where obviously Saturday Night Live was political. But, when Dana Carvey would play H.W. Bush, right, you could tell that Dana Carvey didn't despise H.W. Bush, right? When Daryl Hannah played Bill Clinton, you could tell that they didn't hate the man. They were making fun of him, but they didn't hate the guy. But with Alec Baldwin, you can clearly tell that personally, and you can tell this while he's playing his Donald Trump impression, that he personally disdains the very atoms that make up President Donald Trump. And so it's not funny. It's the worst form of comedy, but they've created for themselves another bubble. The same people that were shocked that Trump won are the same ones that stay in this little bubble, this little Stephen Colbert late night host. You've got the laughter at the jokes that aren't really funny. They're just laughing because they want to be on the winning side again, and that's the same SNL crowd, unfortunately. And I feel sad for them because there are some talented comedians and talented actors, but right now the agenda is to the point where you can't really do genuine comedy because it's going to be called racist. You can't really do genuine comedy that's based on observations in life because you're going to be called a bigot or whatever because it might offend somebody. You can't do that anymore, and it's really good. It's really sad. You can't really do genuine performance of any kind now. We were just talking about how you had remember when Scarlett Johansson, she was cast as a trans man or a trans man, and they were like, well, you're not really trans, Scarlett. How dare you play a trans? It's like, I'm an actress. This is the whole point of, we're trying to, anyway, you can't do any of that. Even the art that classical liberals used to hold close to themselves as this is freedom of expression and we've got to be free and the freedom of speech. Now, no. Because the left has given way to a totalitarian way of thinking, and Andrew Breitbart called them, the late, great Andrew Breitbart, totalitarian freaks. And I heard him say that live, actually. I think it was in Minneapolis, and it was very, very powerful. So you have Kanye West, who is breaking the mold. Kanye West is black, and he is supporting Donald Trump, and he's a giant celebrity. So guess what? White liberals are freaking out about this. So the communications director for Turning Point USA, Candace Owens, observed a tweet that was made by Captain America star Chris Evans. And this was interesting. So Chris Evans, let me see the actual tweet here. I don't know why my computer never actually shows me the actual tweets. Okay, so Chris Evans said this. There is nothing more maddening. This is the Captain America superhero guy. There's nothing more maddening than debating someone who doesn't know history, doesn't read books, and frames their myopia as virtue. The level of unapologetic conjecture I've encountered lately isn't just frustrating, it's retrogressive, unprecedented, and absolutely terrifying. This was Chris Evans in response to Kanye West's tweet wearing a Make America Great Again hat. Now, contrast that, by the way, with the fact that Kanye West in his Saturday Night Live monologue said that it was a Democratic plot to make black people essentially think that they're free while getting them on welfare and destroying their families by pushing the black father out of the household and making the black mom dependent on the government. He said this on Saturday Night Live. Do you understand how absolutely groundbreaking that is, but absolutely world destroying for the left and their little myopia? So Candace Owens, who is a black conservative, tweeted this at Chris Evans and said this: nothing pisses white liberals off more than finding out that their blacks refuse to behave the way they want them to. Both Lana Del Rey and Chris Evans reacted poorly when they learned Kanye wasn't their property. I mean, essentially, what are white liberals doing here? They're saying, oh, well, you know what? Kanye's just stupid. What an intent. I mean, he uses a lot of, you'd think, wow, Chris Evans is smart, got a decent command of the English language. And you want to actually take Kanye on with the ideas he put out there about getting people addicted to welfare so that their families are destroyed, so that you have generational dependency, therefore you have generational poverty, that might be the actual problem that's facing the black community since the 60s when the Great Society programs were instituted. No. Let's not actually get into the substance of what is being claimed by Kanye West, a black Trump supporter. Let's just call him stupid. Yeah. This is a fantastic article by Candace Owens here. She went on. She did not pull any punches, by the way, and eventually, said some other stuff as well. You can check that article out over at Breitbart.com. That headline is Candace Owens. Chris Evans basically called Kanye a dumb N-word over his Trump support. That's Candace Owens saying that. Okay, what else do we have here? All right, let's get to the shakedown of the shakedown, okay? So the shakedown of the shakedown is this. Yesterday we reported that Jeremy Hutchinson, the governor's nephew, has a legal defense fund that's been set up by his friends and advocated for by his father, former U.S. Senator Tim Hutchinson. And so we did a segment on this almost 24 hours ago, and a lot of people, wanted to know, more about this and everything else, because I think a lot of people were, I just think a lot of people were just kind of outraged by this idea. I mean, if you listen to the post by U.S. Senator, former U.S. Senator Tim Hutchinson, it's no surprise that you have a father standing up for his son. But what is surprising is the fact that, you have a former United States Senator Tim Hutchinson, who is very well connected, has, presumably money himself. I understand he's a lobbyist and things like that. And a lot of people who are in politics then, go into the lobbying and things like that. It's just surprising that we have, basically, it's like a call. It's an alarm bell. Sound the alarm to all of the swamp critters in Little Rock. Hey, it's time for you guys to step up and help Jeremy Hutchinson and give him some money anonymously. No one will know you gave it, but we've got to allow Jeremy Hutchinson to beat the rap on tax evasion and on campaign finance fraud, right? And this is his father doing this, former U.S. Senator Tim Hutchinson. We read this to you yesterday, but he said this. Many of you have heard about the legal problems facing my son, Jeremy. Sadly, Jeremy was indicted on tax and campaign finance-related charges. He was arraigned a couple of weeks ago. He pleaded not guilty to all charges, and I have full faith that Jeremy is not guilty of these charges. I know Jeremy loves Arkansas and has served his constituency with dedication. He has never sought to enrich himself from his public service. Wow. Stop. First of all, is former U.S. Senator Tim Hutchinson here trying to convince us that Republicans are somehow out to get Jeremy Hutchinson? this is the question, because, you know, you have these Republican U.S. attorneys. I mean, they get their appointments because they're Republicans. You have these, and listen, the common consensus among a lot of people out there is that these charges came down because they had to come down. I think there was a long list of other charges that could have happened that didn't happen, but I think everything was so bad, was so egregious, that we had to do this. Meaning, I think these charges are not at all what we would have hoped that they should have been, considering the $500,000 he received from Preferred Family Health Care. You understand? So, first of all, it's just incredibly frustrating. I'll just be honest with you. He's never sought to enrich himself. Many of our friends have asked what they could do to help. Jeremy's resources are exhausted, and I have tried to help with legal expenses, but the cost of legal defense in this day is staggering. A legal defense fund has been established for those who may wish to help. I'm grateful to former U.S. Attorney Bud Cummins for his willingness to serve as chairman of the fund. I've included below a statement from Bud on why the fund is needed. Also, there are statements from Jeremy's attorneys. I'm glad to respond to any questions. I'm grateful for your friendship, your prayers, and any help you can give us during this challenging time. Gratefully, former U.S. Senator Tim Hutchinson. Okay, so they're saying, listen, Jeremy didn't do it, and they set up the Hutchinson Legal Defense.com. Hutchinson LegalDefense.com. It's this fancy-looking website where you can go and you can donate to Jeremy's legal defense. Again, you know what this is? This is a shakedown of the shakedown, right? These people at the Marble Palace, they've been shaking people down. They've been taking this money, and they've been doing, you know, shaking down the taxpayers. But this is now a shakedown of the shakedowners, is what it is. It's like, hey, listen, you want to keep everything the way it is? Then my son has got to beat the rap here. I mean, that's what it appears to me. I mean, come on. I know what you're thinking. I mean, I know there's people, I know everybody down there's friends, but come on. Everybody knows. Everybody knew. Everybody knew what was going on. It's no secret. I mean, my goodness. The 1835 Club is real. Or, I'm sorry. The 1835 Club is our parody. The 1836 Club is an actual place where actual people go, where legislators invest in. You know what I'm saying? I mean, come on, folks. This is, you know. I mean, I guess, look, you're innocent until you're proven guilty. You're innocent until you're proven guilty. But, you know, it's just like the Jake Files thing, right? You had story after story after story, and Jake Files said, no, I'm innocent. It's a conspiracy. These men over in Oklahoma are claiming that I falsified their bids. They're in the conspiracy out to get me. And that's essentially what Jake Files was saying. Yeah, these two random contractors over in Oklahoma submitted bids for the General Improvement Fund project. And now they're lying, and they said that I falsified those bids. They're saying that the paperwork that I submitted doesn't even look like anything that their paperwork actually looks like when they do a bid. It's, you know, it's essentially a conspiracy against me. I'm Jake Files. I'm the most unlucky businessman, and I'm this. And so we're to believe, oh, Jeremy, he's just the most unlucky politician down there. He hasn't done anything wrong. Never mind the fact that, you know, he's referencing multiple guilty pleas, and never mind the fact that one of them alleges that he received $500,000, in bribes from a guy who tried to have a witness murdered in New Jersey. Hello? Can we just talk about that for a second? Jeremy Hutchinson, it is alleged that Milton Rusty Russell Cranford gave him $500,000 via Preferred Family Health Care to pass bills for Preferred Family Health Care. And he did all this. I mean, in terms of he passed one resolution just to thank Tom and Bontia Goss, the couple of Preferred Family Health Care that's now under federal investigation for all this Medicaid fraud. And the guy who is pleading guilty here was arrested after he tried to hire a guy to go to New Jersey and kill a guy named Don Jones who pled guilty last December. And Rusty Cranford was found and arrested with $17,000 cash on him and a revolver. So, and this is the guy who is allegedly bribed him $500,000, the governor's nephew, Jeremy Hutchinson. Oh, man. But he's just unlucky, and he's being wrongfully accused of these other charges, tax fraud and campaign finance violations. But he's just the most unlucky guy. He's just it's just the most unlucky politician, and everyone is out to get Jeremy Hutchinson. That's what we're supposed to believe at this point. And that's why it is so brazen. Hey, let's set up a legal defense fund. Christine Blasey Ford is getting like $1 million after this whole debacle is over one way or the other. There's a GoFundMe account for her. Anyway, this is a shakedown of the shakedown. This is, hey, listen. He's got to beat the rap. We need money to beat the rap. Or guess what? All of your other secrets, he may roll on them. You never know. It could get bad. Maybe there's not enough money that comes in, swamp creatures in Little Rock. You guys better start donating. For your own good, you better start donating, swamp creatures in Little Rock. Because if he doesn't get the money, if you don't agree to the shakedown, well, who knows? There may be some little bits of information that you don't want the federal investigators to find out about. Phone number is 870-275-9799. We're going to take a break and be back in a moment. If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government. And the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights. Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Taxes on business, taking the tax cuts away from families. It just is nonsensical, is my only response on that.
Okay, so Congressman French Hill is with us. Tell me about the Golden Fleece Award. I understand your office gives out these Golden Fleece Awards. What are they?
Well, I do it every month. I find someone out in the federal government that's misusing our taxpayer dollars and point it out. And the reason for pointing it out is to try to get policy to change. People go, well, why do you make fun of somebody who's done something dumb, spending a bunch of money incorrectly or making a mistake or even losing money? You should be stopping it. Well, part of stopping it in a legislative environment, in a big, complicated government, is to point it out and to get the IG and the General Accountability Office engaged in trying to correct the behavior and getting it changed in law. So the Golden Fleece Award is handed out to
exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, here we go. So what are the Democrats going to do when it comes to confirming Brett Kavanaugh? What are they going to do? I mean, what's Joe Manchin going to do? I was watching a thing with him. Was talking about how some reporter was following him around at campaign events in West Virginia, and how all these people. I was probably like some sort of barbecue tailgate something, and all these people were coming up to him saying, "Hey, you better vote for Kavanaugh." The polling in West Virginia among independents, among women, is a solid majority of independents and women that want the Democrat from West Virginia, Joe Manchin, to vote for to vote for Brett Kavanaugh. Sorry, there's a photo of Mitch McConnell as I was scrolling down this article here. TheHill.com is reporting, this is Alexander Bolton, that Senate Democrats up for re-election this year in deep red states face a nightmare decision on how to handle Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Vulnerable Democrats are hoping Republicans will force him to withdraw his nomination, allowing them to avoid political divisive votes. The Democrats in the toughest positions are Senators Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, Joe Donnelly of Indiana, and Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Heitkamp and Manchin are undecided, and both are seeking another 6-year term in states that Trump won by double digits in 2016. Donnelly is in much the same boat, but said Friday that he would vote no on Kavanaugh. So Joe Donnelly of Indiana, this would be Mike Pence's stomping grounds, saying, I'm going to vote no. So you have two other senators, again, Joe Manchin and Heidi Heitkamp, who are in play here. And what's funny is that all three of these Democrats voted for President Trump's first Supreme Court pick, Neil Gorsuch. But listen, please do not make the mistake of thinking that if for some reason Brett Kavanaugh fails, that it'll be okay because Trump will get the next one. Trump will get Amy Coney Barrett or whoever he decides to nominate. My gut feeling is this. If the Democrats are successful with these tactics and they torpedo Brett Kavanaugh's nomination, which I don't think they're going to. I think we're going to vote. I think we're going to have the votes. I'm being very optimistic. You can tell. But if you allow the Democrats to do this this time, Donald Trump will never get. He's not going to get another person through the process. I don't care. I don't care if you gain seats in the Senate. I mean, I think there'll be this. This is just going to happen every single time. So, yeah. Well, what would the tag? I don't know. They'll make something up. Joe was just asking, what would they do if it was Amy Coney Barrett up there now? Well, they would criticize her for being a woman, of course. They would completely abandon, because the ends justify the means, because she's a conservative-minded justice in terms of her thinking of the original intent of the Constitution. They would then say, oh, well, she's just a stupid woman. That's what the Democrats would say. They'd figure out something on her. They would, because they don't have standards. The only standards they have are double standards. They would have no standards at all if it were not for double standards over on the left. Anyway, that's not to say that the other side isn't ever caught in hypocrisy, but the left just stays there perpetually. They just are in some sort of, double standard, what's the word I'm looking for? I've lost the word. But anyway, we're going to take a break, going to reset. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Democrat Susie Epperson. Have some questions for her. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a moment.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Sir.
Paul, it's great to be with you. Thanks for the invite.
Yes, sir. Hey, I want to start with the fact that this is the 17-year anniversary of the September 11, 2001 terror attacks on New York and the Pentagon. And I just, where were you? I mean, a lot of people ask that. You know, where were you on September 11, 2001?
At 7:46, I was driving between Bentonville, Arkansas, and Bella Vista, Arkansas, to go to my first meeting with the FDIC on a bank acquisition up at Bella Vista of a failed bank there. And I remember vividly hearing the news story that a small plane had clipped the antenna on Tower 1. And, of course, that's not what happened, but that's, as I was driving along, that's what the news report was.
Wow. And I was just saying last hour how much this event 17 years ago changed the country, the mentality of the country. Seems like, forever. Lots happened in 17 years.
Well, it's amazing. First, I want to say my salute to the families who lost somebody on 9/11, a first responder or somebody in one of the attacks. I lost a very good friend of mine I worked with at the Senate Banking Committee. Neil Levin was our counsel on the Banking Committee, and he had been named the head CEO of the Port Authority, and he was up in the windows on the world that day. And I think about him every year. He left his family behind. Yeah, it's changed our whole focus, and it's been devastating to see Islamic terrorism brought to the shores of America and brought to the shores of Europe, and it's changed our whole defense posture since that fateful day.
Yeah, it certainly has. I want to talk just a little bit about what you've been doing in Washington, D.C., and one of the things, that really stuck out to me, there's this program called the Congressional App Challenge. And first of all, tell us a little bit about that. What's the Congressional App Challenge?
Well, it follows on about 30 years ago. Congress wanted to encourage arts, and they had an art contest for all 435 congressional districts from high school students, and the winners from each district hung their art in the Capitol. And it's beautiful. You see it as you walk through the tunnel of the Capitol. So to flash forward to about 3 years ago, they wanted to encourage coding for high school students and encourage STEM activities, so they created the Congressional App Challenge. And last year, it's really grown. We had 75 applications submitted over the last couple of years, so it's really grown in our high schools, and we're encouraging our high schools to submit apps. And one of our winner last year, Ann Lee at Central High, went on to compete in the Nationals and was recognized in Washington.
And that's what I thought was interesting. This, Arkansas Ann Lee, her app specifically was a car check app to help parents not forget to take their children out of the car. And this is a tragedy, a potential tragedy that has actually happened and hit home right here in Arkansas. And I thought, wow, what a great idea to have an app to say, to remind parents to not leave their kids in the car,
Well, this is what I love about kids, because they're unfiltered when they're thinking about art or thinking about coding for an app. They don't have all the clutter a lot of us older folks have when we're thinking about thinking creatively about solving a problem, finding a solution. And so these kids are looking at everyday issues and looking at their affection, having grown up with a digital world, and looking for an easier way to accomplish a task. And in this instance, think about the kids that might be saved because of it. She's had a lot of interest in her app. She's a remarkable young woman.
We're talking with Congressman French Hill. Let's talk about the economy. What are your thoughts on, you got the unemployment rate of young Americans is doing good. You've got excellent GDP growth, looking like, according to some, predictions, it's going to get even better. What are your thoughts on this, Congressman French Hill?
Well, Paul, look, just in the last few hours, we've had President Obama trying to take credit for the faster economic growth. And I just find that really preposterous. During the last couple of years of
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. Thank you. Let's see here. The phone number, 870-275-9799. Hour number 2. We just got into the first hour where the podcast is available up for our SoundCloud, iTunes subscribers, things like this. Oh, by the way, Joe was telling me, we've got some steady growth on the YouTube page in terms of subscriptions and everything else. So it would really help Conduit News out if you would go to the YouTube page, Conduit News, and subscribe to us. And go ahead and, subscriptions are free. So, click the little bell. You need a YouTube account, but if you have a Google account, then it's the same thing. You can just go to YouTube. Click the little bell for notifications so you know when we're live. You'll get a notification on your phone. You'll also get some of our smaller videos and everything else that we upload. So please do that. It really would help us out because we are really trying to build a YouTube page in the event that Facebook has done even more stuff that we don't know about yet. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I just have this sneaking suspicion that things are not on the up and up. Hey, all right, folks, we want to highlight a race. We've got a race coming up this November for Senate District 19 between Republican James Sturch and Democrat Susie Epperson. Democrat Susie Epperson actually joins us on the program via phone line right now. Susie, welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just start with the obvious, okay? There's not a lot of people who are Democrats or who run as Democrats that come on this show. I think maybe we've had 4 or 5 on, and we've been on almost 10 years or almost 9 years. So Susie, first of all, I understand that you were going to file as a Republican or attempted to file as a Republican initially, but did not. Tell us about what brought you to this point.
Okay, shout out to my friend Chuck Clifton for twisting your arm a little here, Paul.
He did. He did kind of twist my arm a little bit last week. He strongly suggested. There were other people behind the scenes that were strongly suggesting that I have you on as well.
Good. Well, when I initially announced that I was going to run for office, I announced that I was filing as a Republican. That was all fun and games for a few days, Paul, and then reality kicked in. My close friends, Democrats and Republicans, they gave me a reality check, and if you have good friends, they'll give you a reality check, and I needed one. And they sat me down, and they said, you're not going to make it out of this primary alive. I didn't have the resources or the name recognition, and I like to gamble. But, the odds weren't good, and the odds weren't good that I'd make it out of the primary. So, because there were 2 candidates seeking that nomination, I filed as a Democrat, and with respect to both parties. I wanted voters to get to have the opportunity to meet me and ask me questions, and I don't regret that decision in hindsight. Because here we are.
So do you have anybody though that's like kind of hey, I don't know if I can vote for you because you're a Democrat and because of what the party stands for. Which I'll be honest, what the party stands for, Susie, is not something that I agree with or can get behind.
And I understand that, and that's why I stuck to what I said from the beginning. I announced that, I put that in writing, and I was real clear, that the red ticket was full and that I needed more time. And this is what this opportunity has given me. I mean, reality was simple, Paul. When my friends hit me with this, I realized they were right. Reality was that if Sturge won the primary, I was going to be able to show voters that his voting record isn't one we can be proud of. It's not one we can trust. And I felt that this would give me the opportunity to show voters I'm more conservative and I'm more reliable than he is.
Well, and so this is what is this is the part, folks, that's fascinating to me, because the parts of James Sturge, Republican James Sturge's voting record that I disagree with on a on a conservative basis, meaning that he is not a conservative Republican, are the same issues, from what I can gather, Susie, that you're raising. So, do you identify as a conservative, but you're running as a Democrat just as a political vehicle? I mean, would that be consistent? I mean, is that true?
I am definitely a conservative candidate, and I think that I've shown that throughout the race when people have asked me questions. I've already shown that I'm a lot more conservative than James Sturge. Right now, James Sturge is a yes on issue 1. Paul, he can't be yes on issue 1 and be a pro-life candidate. You can't. I'm a pro-life candidate, and what pro-life means to me means that there is not a cap on human life, that we are going to protect the human life from the time it's conceived to the time that you die. And you can't be yes on one and be pro-life. So right there, Paul, I've shown that I'm more conservative than James Sturge is.
Wow. Yeah, and here, the thing about issue 1 is, it's divided Republicans, and they can't stand the life argument. The ones that are for it, they can't. If you call a Republican, you say that they're not pro-life, then that's that's like a heresy in the Republican Party. And,
it's the truth.
Yeah,
it's the truth. The people that are yes on one, that are claiming to be a Republican pro-life candidate, I'm calling bull on that, Paul. And what they're doing is they're listening to special interest groups. You'll see that the ones that are doing this are funded by the same PACs that my opponent is funded by. Money talks, apparently, and apparently it talks them into contradicting their viewpoint on issues. Because pro-life to me means a lot. A lot of people identify pro-life as an anti-abortion issue. Pro-life to me, I was raised old school, Paul, and pro-life to me means that you're going to value a human life from the time it's conceived to the time someone dies, but it also means it involves your right to bear arms. I mean, the right to protect a human life. It goes way deeper for me. Pro-life to me means so much more. We can't even get my opponent to say the word gun control, gun rights, gun anything. He's been mute. Well, he's mute on a lot of issues.
That certainly was the case, during the primary, when, he did defeat Linda Collins Smith. He had the governor's endorsement. Again, we're talking with Democrat Susie Epperson. Hey, Susie, I mean, do you understand right now? I mean, you coming on the program right now is sending the Marble Palace. I mean, their heads are spinning right now. They probably very upset that I'm having you on the program right now.
I think you said it best on the show the other day, Paul. I was listening and someone said, I dance to the beat of my own drum. I agree. I do.
Well, I'm not afraid of ideas. I do think it is, like I said, it's fascinating. This whole situation. As far as State Representative James Sturge goes, he does have a voting record, and you say that you disagree with it. And so what else how else would you highlight the differences between your two views?
Well, I can clearly make a decision, Paul. I made a decision to come on the show. James can't make a decision about anything. He's flip-flopped on special elections. He's flip-flopped on school choice. We need somebody who's going to sit in their chair and make a decision. And I'm that person.
We've got the video of James Sturge walking out after receiving a text message on special election reform. Go ahead.
I have a video of him telling everyone that's not even his fault, that he was paused and told to get up out of his seat.
Now hang on, say that again. He was what?
He said that he was called and told to get up out of his chair.
Oh, that he was called and told to get up out of his chair. Well, yeah, that's what I mean. The video I have, that seems to be what happened. That he was, he looks at the phone, gets a text message, and then leaves, and kills a really good bill that he had just voted for. And it only passed by 2 votes, and then of course they struck 2. He wasn't in his seat when they called his name again. So, we're talking with Susie Epperson. So, Susie, I've been noticing. Go ahead.
That decision, Paul, I want people to understand that decision that he made to get out of his chair, it didn't just cost our district. It cost everyone in the state, and I don't think that's what people understand. And I need people to understand that what he did has cost taxpayers all over the state, Paul, and it's a shame. And people need to know that he's the one to blame for this.
Interesting. Is it possible? Let me ask you this, Susie. Is it possible that if you were to beat James Sturge, which I think is going to be hard considering you're running as a Democrat? I mean, just to be quite honest with you, but are you thinking about changing to being a Republican if you were elected office?
Paul, I'm thinking that if my support, I've not had support from the Democratic Party, which I understand. They read my post when I filed for office. Paul, at this point, our world's so divided, and I could see myself becoming an independent real easily.
So I want to repeat what you just said. You said that the Democrat Party is not supporting you because is it because they know that you are a conservative and you just really are using the Democrat name to get ballot access?
I can't speak for them, Paul,
but they're not giving you support.
No, 0.
Okay, well that's interesting. I find that very, very interesting. So let me ask you this: the culture in Little Rock right now, generally, how would you describe it?
I heard Josh Miller describe it the other day as a little swampy. Once you get to the River Bridge, and I'm smelling it all the way from Batesville, Paul.
So, have you been following some of the corruption, the allegations, the guilty pleas? Go ahead.
Of course I have, and this issue that's being brought up now with loans. Hey, Paul, I need some interest-free loans. I have a son in college right now. If they're giving out interest-free loans, maybe I should sign up for that. Yeah,
and I think the loan problem, it's just the fact that it's all going unreported. It's not illegal for a legislator to give another legislator loan, but when you do it and then you don't report it, it makes it seem shady because, honestly, I think there had been a lot of rank-and-file Republicans that had a big problem if they knew that Joe Jett had given had given him the Speaker of the House $16,000. Vice versa with Jake Files, now convicted felon, Jim Hendren giving him $4,000. I think if more people knew that was going on, they would think, wow, it really is like a lean on me and I'll vote for your bill, later situation, or you'll vote for my bill when I need your vote. That kind of stuff, when you're financially vulnerable, then you basically leave yourself open to being manipulated, controlled, blackmailed. All kinds of things come to mind. And I wonder if there are other legislators out there, Susie, who have taken loans and not reported them.
I'm beginning to wonder the same thing because in light of everything that's going on, I've asked people that have tuned into my Facebook post. I've asked them. I said, why don't you reach out to him and ask him if he's accepted any loans, my opponent, and he's not returned phone calls. And I think that's interesting. I'm not accusing him of anything, but had I been in his shoes and I hadn't accepted any loans, I would have been able to have answered that question really quick. No, absolutely not. I've not accepted loans from my fellow seatmates or my fellow legislators. And I think he needs to make that statement for us, Paul. Well, I think it's time that he comes out and says that.
Well, I think at this point, if there's anybody out there, Republican or Democrat, running for public office, anytime there is a new revelation that is exposing corruption or the appearance of corruption, I think it's just good governance and good politics to go to your people and condemn the actions and say, hey, I haven't done any of this stuff, and we need to figure out a way to stop this because I know it's concerning to you, and it's definitely concerning to me. We want good, honest government, and we want honest government so that then we can honestly talk about policies, taxes, regulation, that sort of thing. It's hard to do those things if the Speaker of the House is getting $16,000 from a Democrat and then the Democrat gets the most powerful committee chairmanship in the House afterwards. I mean, it's really difficult. So, anyway, Susie, I'm going to give you the last word, and I really appreciate you coming on the program.
Okay, thank you for having me. And I want viewers that are listening. I know that they supported Linda, and I know that, and I realize that no matter who wins in November, and I've said this before, and I've said this at several meetings that I've attended lately, that no matter what happens in November, whether it's James or whether it's Susie, Linda's always going to be number one to them. And I know the viewers that you have, she's always going to be number one. And Paul, I'm okay with being number two. I'm all right with that. But if the viewers and the voters make me number three, we all lose. We all lose.
Hey, I appreciate you coming on. Susie Apperson, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
All righty. Have a great morning. Susie Apperson, everybody. It's fascinating. She's not getting Democrat support because I think they know that she's at least claiming, she tried to run as Republican, said, no, never mind. You do the ballot access. But then James Sturtz beat Linda Collins Smith, and now you have this, let's just say, it appears that you have a conservative running against a liberal. But, in kind of, potentially, I mean, you make the judge. James Sturtz, by the way, is welcome on this program. I've tried to get him on in the past. He hasn't ever acknowledged that he received any of my messages. And I know I have the right number. So, anyway, I'd love to talk to him about a lot of stuff, honestly. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. The phone number, 870-275-9799. And we'll be back here in just a moment.
President Bush, when we slumped into recession and then had the crash, and then all 8 years of President Obama, you had economic growth at 1.8% average for that period. That's the lowest since World War II. It was a very bad, anemic recovery. And part of that was the $1 trillion cost and complexity of the Affordable Care Act, cutting people's work hours back in the Affordable Care Act, putting on new regulations across all sizes of business, condemning business, passing the Dodd-Frank Act, which hurt loans for families and businesses and for individuals. So I think President Trump does deserve credit for the faster economic growth. When you see the removal of regulations, billions of dollars of costs removed in regulatory burden at the federal level by this president and by congressional action, as well as the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. These have spurred economic growth and brought jobs back to the U.S. and created new opportunities.
Legislation killed?
Plus, people are not talking down
do you need policies enacted that ensure government growth?
Then you need to get
Nephewed. Hi, I'm nephew number one of uncle, nephew, and nephew, attorneys at law. I'm not a lawyer, but I am a senator.
And I'm nephew number 2, and I am a lawyer and also a senator.
Are you the victim of a recent accident in which the voters in your community mistakenly elected a limited government conservative who is now actually implementing the ideas he or she campaigned on?
That's right, nephew number 1. Don't be a victim of democratic elections any longer. At Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew, we are committed to killing limited government legislation and promoting bills that increase the size of government by using any tool at our disposal.
Because sometimes the truth of the matter is, principles get in the way of pragmatism.
Just listen to some of our great testimonials.
Ever since I've been using the nephews, all my special interests have been served. As long as you make sure your contract says lobbying services are prohibited, then the legal services of Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew are legal. Trust me, put the nephews on them.
It came out of nowhere. I was blindsided last election cycle
when my well-funded and paid-for politician lost to some grassroots limited government voters. But then, I hired the nephews, and they killed all the conservative policies the voters wanted. I got nephewed.
I got nephewed too, and so can you. Uncle, nephew, and nephew will accept compensation via campaign contributions. Put the nephews on them.
PHP Parody.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right. So welcome back to the show. We have it's time now for it's Tuesday, and this is the time where we do most weeks. We try to do our carefully crafted language segment. Carefully crafted language brought to you by Governor Asa Hutchinson.
I want to refer everybody back to my remarks because that's the key language that was carefully crafted.
All right, so I was going to try to pull some Kavanaugh hearing carefully crafted language. I mean, if you listen to the Democrats, you know, it's pretty obvious. And but then I found this photo yesterday. And I think, what is this? Is this at the Bikers Blues and Barbecue event? There was some confusion as to what the weapons policy was going to be. And then you have Glenn Brittlin, who's been on the program before, and I'm a fan of Glenn. And he posted this photo. Look at this photo. For those of you who are not watching the show, it's a photo of Glenn taking a selfie when he with a gun strapped to his belt, open carrying, and he's right in front of a sign that says this: "No weapons in violation of ACA 5-73-120 or Act 746." Now, this, ladies and gentlemen, is carefully crafted language, because if you don't know what constitutes a violation under 5-73-120, and you see that sign, "No weapons in violation of 5-73-120, most people are going to say, oh, no weapons. But the fact is, in order for Glenn here to be in violation of carrying a weapon under 5-73-120 or Act 746, they would have to prove that he was about to unlawfully use that gun against another person. Good luck with that. Now, this is kind of maddening to me in a way, because while it is telling those of us who are educated, yes, weapons are allowed, essentially, open carry, constitutional carry is allowed, this doesn't say constitutional carry zone. It's going to essentially mean that, people are going to see that sign and think that there's no weapons allowed. It's carefully crafted language. It's in a way, it'd be like if there was one class of citizens that spoke a secret language and the government's putting that out there for them, but they want to keep everybody else in the dark. They don't really want to admit what the law is. What a carefully crafted sign, though, right? Somebody thought this up. Somebody really clever thought this up, right? Don't you think? Somebody said, well, that's what the law says, and we can't waste all this taxpayer dollars. I mean, we're at Bikers, Blues, and Barbecue. We can't waste all these taxpayer dollars arresting people that aren't actually we're not going to be able to get any kind of conviction on. So what do? Well, we'll post a no weapons sign, but it'll say no weapons in violation of ACA 5-73-120. Carefully crafted language. Again, brought to you by Governor Asa Hutchinson.
I want to refer everybody back to my remarks because that's the key language that was carefully crafted.
Yeah, and this was more like carefully crafted written language. We're going to be right back with Fort Smith attorney Joey McCutcheon.
President Bush, when we slumped into recession and then had the crash, and then all 8 years of President Obama, you had economic growth at 1.8% average for that period. That's the lowest since World War II. It was a very bad, anemic recovery. And part of that was the $1 trillion cost and complexity of the Affordable Care Act, cutting people's work hours back in the Affordable Care Act, putting on new regulations across all sizes of business, condemning business, passing the Dodd-Frank Act, which hurt loans for families and businesses and for individuals. So I think President Trump does deserve credit for the faster economic growth. When you see the removal of regulations, billions of dollars of costs removed in regulatory burden at the federal level by this president and by congressional action, as well as the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. These have spurred economic growth and brought jobs back to the U.S. and created new opportunities. Plus, people are not talking down business. Trump, as a business guy, is out talking up business. So I really think it's impressive to see that we've now averaged 3.1% in the last 18 months, had this recent quarter just over 4%. The Atlanta Fed thinks we may get another quarter over 4%. And I just would say to listeners, those are not trends, but if we have a trend that has economic growth over 3%, that's excellent, really good. And it allows us to have the resources we need in our federal government, and that means that people are going to see higher wages and more job opportunities.
You are exactly right. And then, then you have small business optimism. As it's at a record high. I mean, people just feel good about going to work. And so it's just, really, really exciting times. And, we need to continue this. Don't need to go back to the old policies. We need to continue with these policies and, even better policies in the future.
Right. I mean, the Fed has been slowly raising interest rates. They've got a plan to slowly normalize rates from the absolute ridiculous levels that they stayed too low, in my view, too long after the crash based on the Fed's easing policy. I think they should have begun a slight increase earlier, but nonetheless, they're doing it. And we're seeing their timing on that's important because we're now seeing robust wage growth. We've seen the fastest wage growth for Americans in this last reporting period that we haven't seen in a decade. Mm-hmm. So people's wages are going up. I know the opposition political.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. We're kind of the home stretch here. Please welcome back to the program. We have Fort Smith attorney Joey McCutcheon is back on the program. Joey, how you doing this morning?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Paul.
Yes, sir. How's Fort Smith doing?
Hey, Fort Smith's doing good. We're still trying to shine the bright spotlight on what our government's doing down here. We've one of the issues we've got still ongoing is what's happening with this special prosecutor with Jake Files, who took the $80,000 wire transfer from nursing home owner David Norsworthy. That's really a lot of folks want to know when David Norsworthy and Jake Files are going to be prosecuted for that, because it sure looks like a quid pro quo.
It really does. And isn't Jake Files already serving? He began serving his 18th month sentence.
He is, and he of course was involved in stealing General Improvement Fund money, like we had up north. So the question is it's the same thing with Michael Maggio down in Conway. He takes a bribe from David Norsworthy's partner, Michael Morton, and Michael Morton skates, for basically undoing a jury award. And same thing here. After tort reform was filed in 2015, Norsworthy clearly sends a secret $80,000 wire transfer, and guess what? He still hasn't been prosecuted. It's a pretty simple matter.
Yeah, and it's blatant as well, and so you gotta wonder. First, you gotta wonder. Has Norsworthy talked to the FBI? I would certainly want to know that. I mean, who knows? Does he have information that might be useful in other cases? There's a lot of moving parts here that we can't really see.
Yeah, there really are, and you look at issue 1, and I mean, if we ask your listeners who before the 2017 session contacted their legislature and said, hey, we want to put a price tag on the most vulnerable among us, stay-at-home moms, children, unborn life, or elderly, I wonder how many would say, yeah, I contacted my legislator and said that was my top priority. I wonder how many of the listeners out there contacted our legislator and said, hey, let's give the most political body, the legislature, control over the rules of the court so that we can violate our separation of powers. I mean, no, I think we all know that it's special interests like the nursing home owners who are using carefully crafted words. I thought that was an interesting subject this morning. I saw where Randy Zook came out in the newspaper the other day and said, issue 1 preserves the right to trial by jury. So we're going to set a limit on brain damage, quadriplegia, and death that juries can listen to the facts and decide, and we're going to call that preserving our right to trial by jury. Well, I would ask, what about Article 2, Section 7 that says the right to trial by jury shall remain inviolate? Or Article 2, Section 13, which says that folks who are injured should obtain justice completely? I don't know what special interest, where they're getting their definitions, but I'm not sure Arkansans agree.
It's really sad that Randy Zook would say something. I've been disheartened with the ability of the other side to essentially, project the very thing that they are guilty of, onto, the other side. They're telegraphing what they're guilty of when they say with their defenses, if you vote for issue 1, it'll end special interest or it'll curb special interest, and they do this completely ignoring that if it wasn't for nursing homes, this bill would not be written the way it's been written.
Yeah, and if didn't they tell us the same thing back in 2014 when they on issue 3, which they kept selling us that, this is going to ban lobbyist gifts to state officials. This is going to ban corporate contributions to candidates. And then what do we get? We got an increase in term limits and an increase in legislator pay. So we need to be very careful about the bait and switch here. They keep on throwing out this jobs business. Well, Randy Zook himself said we have plenty of jobs, we just don't have a trained workforce. I mean, we've got the lowest unemployment rate in state history. Why don't we lower taxes? Why don't we train our workforce? Why don't we improve education in the state of Arkansas? All conservative ideas, and we will attract jobs. Mr. Zook says that we're going to attract doctors by passing issue 1. Well, remember what Rose Mims says, who came out against Arkansas Right to Life? Jerry Cox. Well, what kind of doctors are we going to attract by limiting accountability if they kill or maim someone? Well, we're going to attract bad abortion doctors. We're going to attract bad doctors from other states who are booted from their state. We need good doctors in Arkansas, but we don't need to attract the bad ones.
I was talking to somebody the other day who was undecided on issue 1. Could kind of see the merits what he called the merits of both sides. But here's the thing, Joey. A lot of some business owners think, okay, this is going to help fight frivolous lawsuits. the truth is there's nothing in this that would curb frivolous lawsuits, right?
Well, hey, that's right, Paul. And there's a challenge. There's a standing challenge out there that a certain person will give anybody $5,000 who could show where issue 1 in any way deals with frivolous lawsuits. And I'll one up them. I'll eat the document if they can find where issue 1 deals with frivolous lawsuits. It's not in there, Paul. They don't care about frivolous lawsuits. What they care about are meritorious lawsuits. They want to limit their exposure when someone is killed. And that's why Jerry Cox is going on a statewide tour, actually starting as we speak. He's going to be going with Jerry Cox with Family Council, for some who may not know, is going city to city talking about what's wrong with issue 1. You know, Jerry calls it the price on life amendment because it's like, as he says, it's like putting a Kelly Blue Book value on a car.
Yes.
Or, you know, an appraisal on a piece of property. And and that's why, conservative groups are largely against this, because it's not pro-life.
Yeah.
We as conservatives and Republican Party, we respect and value life and hold life with sanctity, and this is just not consistent with our moral values.
And I was going to say, if you take the morality out of it, you understand how easy this is for the nursing homes to write it and be in favor of it. Because if you cap these non-economic damages at $500,000, then the nursing home, they make money hand over fist. So they will have no incentive to change the behavior if they neglect an elderly person, cause their death, cause serious harm. They can now say, okay, well, we now have a knowable cost. How many of these lawsuits do we face? All right, and now we are only going to have to pay out $500,000. Fantastic. We don't have to change what we're doing. We don't have to try to provide better care where we fail. Instead, it's now part of doing business that we're just going to have to pay out $500,000 every time, one of these incidents happen. And that, again, is, if you take the morality concept out of it, you can see why they have an economic incentive to do this and advocate for it.
Sure, and let's not remember that the other driver behind this are insurance companies. Nursing homes should be carrying insurance that cover the death of our loved ones in nursing homes. We saw what happened in California. They passed tort reform back in 1976 based upon the premise that they were going to lower the premiums for doctors. Well, guess what? Over a 13-year period in California, doctors' rates went up 450%. Until 13 years later, in 1988, they passed Proposition 103. Guess what Proposition 103 was? Which stabilized doctors' insurance rate. It was insurance reform. So I think our legislature needs to start focusing on insurance reform, put some regulations where insurance companies have to justify why they're increasing our good doctors' rate, why they're increasing our car rate. And if they can show that it's not through bad investments, which, by the way, that's what happened in California, they were making bad investments. The profits of insurance companies, medical malpractice insurance companies, is astronomical in Arkansas, and they're not giving any of that money back to our good drivers. And but they're paying their CEOs, $20 million a year. Mm-hmm. So let's look at insurance reform before we start taking away the rights of the people.
Yeah, I completely agree. What's going on with Arkansas and insurance companies just in general is, I think history will eventually show is one of the biggest frauds ever on the taxpayers of this state. We're talking to Joey McCutcheon, Fort Smith attorney. Now, Joey, we're talking about the pitfalls of issue 1 and why it's not good. But I'd like to ask you about maybe another issue, specifically with the ongoing discovery that's coming out with the corruption in Arkansas politics. Going back to the general improvement funds that Jake Files stole. if you go a little bit north, you end up getting into the the John Woods case, convicted felon John Woods sentenced to 18 years. That ties back to Ecclesia College, and I'm just wondering, are we ever going to find out exactly what Ecclesia College spent all that money on?
Well, as you know, we've got a lawsuit pending right now where they would not give us documents. We've also got a lawsuit to recover the $600,000 or $700,000 public dollars that they gave to this private college. Things are happening. We have set depositions of legislators because we want to get to the bottom of this. We understand conservative values and respect for our taxpayer dollars, and that money went for the wrong purpose. It was not used. Even if you get past the premise that why are a group of conservative legislators giving our taxpayer dollars to a private college in Northwest Arkansas? Well, why aren't they calling for that money back that went to that institution and did not go to the purpose that they said they were going to use it for? It's time for accountability, and it's time for light. And all of this ties back to special interest, and it's really just disrespect for the taxpayer of Arkansas and disrespect for our rights. And whether it's Ecclesia or Issue 1, we've got to stand up and be accountable for tonight, Paul. Just to jump back very quickly, there's a forum in Northwest Arkansas at the Northwest Arkansas Community College on Issue 1. I would encourage all folks in Northwest Arkansas to attend that. The funny thing is, or the travesty is that the other side is not showing up. I think that they see that anytime there's education about Issue 1 and its placing of a special price tag on life, it's separation of powers issues, they know that they're not gaining ground, so they're just not showing up for forums. So anyone who doesn't understand Issue 1, I hope they'll come tonight. There'll be discussions from Chad Gallagher, who was with the Huckabee administration, Annabelle Clinton Tuck, a former justice, and Representative Jimmy Gazaway, who, by the way, stood up for our rights in the legislative session and in session said how bad and how egregious this attack on life was. And unfortunately, he wasn't listened to by the majority.
No, he wasn't. And Republican Jimmy Gazaway did a good job there. He even tried to offer an alternative that they didn't want to have anything to do with. Joey McCutcheon, I so appreciate it. And the thing is, one of the reasons the other side may not be showing up to these forums is because they don't want to get in a Bob Ballinger situation, Joey, where Bob Ballinger comes out and he gets so frustrated at the crowd and he says, he tries to stand up for legislators and he ends up saying that nobody going down to Little Rock is benefiting from it, is personally benefiting from it. And then, of course, he got laughed off the stage. So maybe people don't want to repeat that kind of behavior.
Well, we've got to be realistic about what's going on. The corruption in Arkansas from various legislators has been startling, to say the least. We've got good legislators who go to Little Rock and they do the right thing. But the bottom line is, and the important thing is that there is so much influence on our political, on our legislature in Little Rock. Our Constitution, our 1874 Constitution, Article 5, Section 32, said that the legislature cannot limit damages. And the reason that was passed in 1874 overwhelmingly by the voters was there was corruption. There was corruption of the legislature by railroads right after the Civil War. And how ironic would it be that in the times of probably some of the greatest corruption in the state of Arkansas, legislators and special interests are trying to undo Article 5, Section 32 of our Constitution.
Wow.
Unbelievable. The irony of that. And I think people are seeing through that, Paul.
Yeah.
That we can't allow the legislature, who is controlled by special interests, we can't let David Norsworthy and Michael Morton write the rules of the court. And
All
that's who would be writing them, because they give the most money. They've given an amazing amount of money to legislators, and we've got to push back on that.
I know. Real quick, I know you've mentioned that before, but what year was that the voters 18 what that were with the railroads?
1874. That provision, Article 5, Section 32, has been in our Constitution since 1874. We followed suit after Pennsylvania was having the same problems with corrupt special interests called railroads, and they were cutting deals with the legislators. Railroad workers were getting injured, so they were writing laws that said were capping damages, and so they had to Pennsylvania had to put it in their Constitution, and Arkansas followed suit 2 years later. And now legislators and special interests are trying to bait and switch.
Yes.
Talk about trial lawyers. Greedy. We're trying to protect you from greedy trial lawyers. I mean, come on. I mean, that's just bait and switch. We don't create injuries. We just try to get folks hold corporations fairly and fully accountable, and get justice for our clients.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on, and, I'm kind of seeing a parallel here because, back in the 1870s with the railroad, I mean, they were very much in bed with the government, using government as a way to, build the railroads and things like that. The government was involved with, regulatory process, to say the least. And I see, okay, that was the biggest industry here in Arkansas at the time, pretty much. What's the biggest industry in Arkansas now? It's insurance. It's this whole health care situation, and it's same thing.
If you look at the theme of the day, Paul, there's articles on this actually from the Arkansas Democrat. It says the theme of the day was distrust of government. I mean, that is right on point with today. But instead of trying to pass laws to prevent corruption, we're trying to erase from our Constitution a provision that held government in check and held the legislature in check. It's just like Governor Hutchinson said yesterday. The separation of powers is eroding. The legislature back in 2014 passed a constitutional amendment which gave the legislature approval power over executive department regulations. Now they want to take over control of the court.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a dangerous proposition when the legislature is encroaching upon the executive branch and now the judicial branch.
Yeah.
We can't allow that to happen.
Yeah.
There's a reason for the checks and balances that our founders put in our Constitution.
I agree. Joey McCutcheon, I appreciate it, sir. Fort Smith attorney. We'll talk to you again soon. Good luck at that forum.
Hey, thank you.
All
Bye-bye.
righty. Yeah, I agree. Separation of powers is eroding. I think another example of the separation of powers eroding would be the governor's nephew, Jim Hendren, being the president pro temp of the Senate. I mean, that essentially makes the Senate a state agency, not a legislative body. Back in a moment.
If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government, and the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock.
Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
President Bush, when we slumped into recession and then had the crash, and then all 8 years of President Obama, you had economic growth at 1.8% average for that period. That's the lowest since World War II. It was a very bad, anemic recovery. And part of that was the $1 trillion cost and complexity of the Affordable Care Act, cutting people's work hours back in the Affordable Care Act, putting on new regulations across all sizes of business, condemning business, passing the Dodd-Frank Act, which hurt loans for families and businesses and for individuals. So I think President Trump does deserve credit for the faster economic growth. When you see the removal of regulations, billions of dollars of costs removed in regulatory burden at the federal level by this president and by congressional action, as well as the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. These have spurred
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, folks. Welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us today. We're kind of the waning minutes of this Tuesday broadcast, so thank you for starting the beginning of your day with us here. It's the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. During the first hour, we were going over some of these, the Kavanaugh sex crime investigator. I guess her name is Rachel Mitchell, and her 5-page memo that dropped yesterday that calls really raises some serious questions into the credibility of Christine Blasey Ford. Listen, I just want to reiterate what I said the other day, I'm sorry, last hour, and that is simply this. Confirm Kavanaugh, confirm him now, confirm him sooner rather than later. I'm glad that Mitch McConnell says that there will be a vote, but listen, if you think that if Kavanaugh is defeated, that it'll be okay because they won't do this to Amy Cohen Barrett, they won't do this to another nominee, you are kidding yourself. The left at this point feels like they have been injured in a way because they didn't get Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court because Obama nominated him. Guess what? If you wanted Merrick Garland, then the Democrats should have won more elections so that they could have controlled the Senate at the time. That's how it works. Now that the Republicans still control the Senate and have the presidency, we have the left throwing what is a temper tantrum. They have really forever damaged and corrupted the process of nominating a Supreme Court justice, and they're doing it all for one reason. There may be other reasons that I don't know, but I'm telling you right now, they know Roe versus Wade will be at the very least redefined in terms of changed in some way, and they know that their chance at getting legislative victories with the courts will be over for the next 20, 30. If we get Ruth Bader Ginsburg out of there, then it's going to be even longer than that. And they know this, and that's what it's about. They are having a temper tantrum. They have done nothing. The left is in a blind rage. They have seen nothing but red since 2016. They have no idea how they're alienating the voters right now, how many independents and Democrats are sick of what's going on. But I'm just telling you right now, please, Republicans, do not make the mistake of thinking that if we somehow don't vote on Brett Kavanaugh, because the allegations are going to keep coming, we know that. If we somehow get him to withdraw, well, it'll be okay. They'll be okay with whoever the next person is. That's not true, because the only standards the left have are double standards, and they'll turn on Amy Cohen Barrett or a woman easily without batting an eye, and the media won't call him out on it.